It's 2015 and the superhero genre of the movie industry is as high as it's ever been. It seems like you can't even go to your local cinema without one currently playing or at least be advertised as coming soon. With the whole DC versus Marvel war dominating the box office for the past few years, you would think that people would be tired and that the genre itself would be close to overstaying its welcome and go into hibernation. But no. Already, there are announcements for these movies right up to the end of the decade. So what was it that made the superhero genre so popular? It had a rocky start for the last quarter of the 20th century. Most of the movies were subpar renditions created by studios that didn't really invest the time or talent that it would take to create the worlds and characters that so many loved. Sure, there were exceptions like the original Superman movies, though they did present a rather cheesy and naive view on the world. Tim Burton's Batman was probably the first movie that showed the comic book fans what could really be done if those involved were truly invested and wanted to make something that showcased the stories that fans had grown to love. But just when it looked like the genre was heading in the right direction, we had terrible cash-in attempts on the newly rejuvenated superhero franchise and it all went downhill from there.
Go fuck yourself.
Thankfully, as the 90s were wrapping up, a franchise called Blade entered the scene. The actors took the roles a lot more seriously. The content was targeted at a more mature audience, while, at roughly the same time, X-Men was released. This was the first attempt to create a full ensemble of our heroes and villains on screen. The content was appealing to the adult demographic, but it had enough family-friendly elements for it to appeal to the youths as well. This formula seems to be what they're going with now. Superhero movies try their best to include a busload of characters that all go on to have their own successful spin-offs. Everyone remembers Blade, X-Men, but at roughly the same time as both those movies came out, a completely different kind of superhero movie snuck under the radar. Unbreakable, written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. The story follows a miserable security guard, David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis of all people, delivering arguably the best performance of his career. After coming to the realisation that he has never been sick or injured, he begins to seek the true meaning of his existence. This idea is planted in his mind by Elijah Price, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who suffers the complete opposite. He constantly from a young age got sick and his bones break easily. Elijah took solace in comic books from a young age. Unable to play outside because of his condition, he jumps to the conclusion that Dunn must be a superhero that should use his abilities to help the others around him. Understand the concept of Bruce Willis playing a depressed superhero who needs to embrace himself sounds like the concept for a goofy comedy that doesn't take itself too seriously, but this movie goes the other direction. It takes itself as seriously as it possibly can. The movie is fueled by drama in its purest form. While modern day hero movies are filled with flashy effects, comedy one-liners and huge set pieces, Unbreakable takes a slow, helpless approach that helps you connect with the character. There isn't much action. It almost comes across as a psychological thriller where you really want to understand more of what the character's going through and you want to see it work out for him. It feels like a real human being going through a real crisis, and it becomes a lot more than just whether or not good will prevail over evil through a climactic fight. Despite being labelled as a comic book movie, it isn't a direct adaptation of anything. Some might argue that it's a very loose version of the Superman story, only following the concept that Superman isn't actually aware that he is Superman until much later in life. They even make a play on the gun scene from Superman where David's son wants to prove that he's invincible.
Joseph! You are about to be in big trouble! Now I am your father and I am telling you to put that goddamn gun down right now! 1, 2...
Subtle references are thrown in all over the place. The villain's wearing an orange jumpsuit, the security raincoat resembles a cape, and the hero harnesses a weakness. For Dunn, it happens to be water. It doesn't act as a complete weakness like kryptonite, but they establish the idea that Dunn can't swim and that it's possible for him to drown despite his apparent invincibility. The visuals are incredible, appearing like they've been storyboarded from actual comic strips, which I think was the idea, as is the music composed by James Newton Howard. Shyamalan and Howard have always worked well together, and in my opinion, this movie is probably the best combined work of both men to date. The dark tone also makes it feel a lot more real than the other superhero movies out there. The villains are real people, doing horrible things to other real people. The movie never gets the recognition that it deserves, my own sister even claiming it's the worst movie that she'd ever seen. The worst. I put that down to the marketing. It would have been hard for any studio to advertise this movie in a way that shows just how original and brilliant it is. Amongst all the comic book movies that we have these days, I'd go as far as saying that Unbreakable is even more refreshing watching it today than it was back then. It's a different kind of comic book movie, and don't let the fact that M. Night Shyamalan directed it put you off either. Back then, he was at his absolute peak. It all went downhill shortly after. Even Quentin Tarantino himself praised it, claiming it to be one of the 10 greatest movies that he'd ever seen since he himself started making movies. To say anything else about the story, it would be going into spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen the movie, check it out.